Welcome back to Decode Healthcare with Harshal. In Part 7, we unlocked the surprisingly complex world behind the simple word "and" in the coding manual. Well, today, our explainer tackles a massive real-world coding headache. We're on a mission to finally resolve the endless confusion between other specified and unspecified codes, specifically those pesky point 8 and point 9 extensions. If you've ever felt like you're kind of just guessing between these two, trust me, you aren't alone. But mixing them up, that's going to absolutely wreck your clean claim rate.
Okay, let's dive right into this core question to kick off our mission. Picture this. You're reading a chart. The physician has documented a highly specific, undeniable condition. But when you go to your ICD-10-CM manual, the exact code just isn't there. What do? Do you guess? Do you leave it blank? Understanding the precise rules for this exact scenario is what really separates average coders from true professionals.
So, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to cover the code extension confusion, break down other codes, unpack unspecified codes, connect this all to NEC versus NOS, talk about avoiding the unspecified trap, and wrap up with some solid best practices.
Starting off with Section 1, the code extension confusion.
Why is paying attention to these specific extensions absolutely critical to your revenue cycle? Well, the crucial point here is that while these single digits, usually a point 8 or a point 9 sitting at the end of your code, might seem like tiny, minor details, they actually represent two entirely different documentation paths in the tabular list. One tells the insurance company, hey, we know exactly what this is, but your system just doesn't have a specific code for it. The other basically says, we actually don't have enough information. Treating these two as interchangeable, that's a massive red flag for auditors.
Let's move right into Section 2 and get other codes explained.
According to Section IA9A of the CMS guidelines, an other code is actually a massive victory for documentation. You use an other code, which often ends in a .8, when the doctor did their job perfectly. They documented a highly specific condition, right? But the ICD-10 system itself just lumps it into a catch-all category. The flaw isn't in the medical record at all. The limitation is strictly in the codebook.
Think of the point 8 extension as a catch-all drawer. Imagine looking at a clinical note with a highly specific diagnosis written out beautifully, but as you flip through your digital coding manual, you just see a list of codes ending in a point 8, labeled Other Specified. That point 8 extension literally translates to specific details exist. You have the info, you just need a drawer to put it in.
Which brings us to Section 3, Unspecified Codes Explained.
Now, let's contrast that catch-all drawer with a completely different situation, the dreaded blank label. Section IA9B of the CMS guidelines lays this out brilliantly. You only use an unspecified code when the medical record completely lacks the clinical details needed to pick a distinct path. The guideline explicitly states that unspecified means the information is insufficient. Basically, the ball was dropped in the documentation phase.
Unlike the highly specific details required for a point 8, the point 9 extension means your documentation is bare bones. Picture a really sparse electronic health record entry that simply says otitis media. It doesn't say if it's acute, chronic, serious, or suppurative. Because of that missing data, you are forced into a code ending in point 9 labeled unspecified. The point 9 extension equals missing documentation details, plain and simple.
Let's tie this all together in Section 4, the NEC versus NOS connection.
You need to hardwire this direct connection into your brain, especially since we just covered these conventions. Your point 8 other codes are intimately tied to the NEC convention, not elsewhere classifiable. You have the specific details, but the book doesn't have a class for it. On the flip side, your point 9 unspecified codes are tied to the NOS convention, not otherwise specified. You simply don't have the details. So remember, NEC pairs with point 8 and NOS pairs with point 9.
Moving on to Section 5, avoiding the unspecified trap.
According to Section IB18 of the CMS guidelines, unspecified codes absolutely have necessary, legitimate uses when information is truly unknown at the time of the encounter. However, and this is a massive however, payers are increasingly targeting and denying point 9 unspecified codes. Imagine seeing an insurance denial letter with a giant red stamp reading "Denied lacks clinical specificity." It's a nightmare. Payers know when a definitive diagnosis should have been established during an encounter, and they will absolutely punish you if you use the point 9 as a lazy shortcut. To avoid that devastating red denial stamp, you've got to be proactive. First, scour the EHR for hidden clinical details. Sometimes that specificity is buried in a lab result or an operative note. Second, if it's missing, you must query the physician for that specificity. Don't just settle for the blank label. And finally, assign the code based on the highest certainty known for that encounter, exactly as the official guidelines instruct. Accuracy always overrides easy coding.
Let's wrap this up with Section 6, Best Practices. It really boils down to this. Your input directly dictates your output. A clean, highly specific note from your provider leads you straight to your point 8, catch-all drawer. You've captured the complexity perfectly. But a sparse, lazy note, lacking details, forces you right into the point 9 unspecified trap, leaving your facility completely vulnerable to audits and denials. I really hope this explainer completely resolved your point 8 versus point 9 confusion. If you found this valuable, please hit subscribe and check out the full ICD-10 playlist. You are not going to want to miss Part 9, where we decode the secret roadmap built right into the tabular chapters. Includes notes and inclusion terms. These literally tell you exactly what belongs under a code category. I'll leave you at this final thought to reflect on today. Are you taking that extra step to query your doctors for missing details? Or are you falling into the point 9 unspecified trap? What steps will you take tomorrow to protect those clean claim rates? Keep decoding, and I'll see you in Part 9.